welcome back. So today we'll do a reading recap of what I've read in April and May. I put the 2 months together because there really wasn't much, given that I am the slowest reader in all of Southeast Asia. I'll do better. I'll try to do better. I want to do better. I want to read more books. In these recent years, I've slacked off a bit on my reading goals. Usually I aim to read at least 30 books a year and I end up with 10. So 6 books in 2 months is an achievement for me. I want y'all to be proud of me. I want to hear that applause because I'm proud of myself. Okay, so let's start with the first book. This one isn't a book, really. It's more of like a short story. No, it is a short story. It's called Lovers at the Museum by Isabel Allende. I did not like this short story. I thought I would like it because I consider Isabel Allende as one of the hallmarks of magic realism. I used to read her a lot when I was in college. This short story just missed the mark for me. It's about two lovers who wound up in a museum. They were found by security, and much of the story happens in the interrogation room where they ask the lovers, like, how did you end up here? How did you find yourselves in the museum late at night with a woman in a wedding dress and a man stark naked? Like, how did that happen? How did security let you in? How did you go through security? So that's where the magic realist elements appear. I wasn't impressed by this story. I could also see Isabel's attempts at humor, and they fell flat a lot of the time. And I've always wondered how magic realism would evolve over the years because this genre of fiction really boomed in, the 1960s, 1970s, and I'm sad that I didn't like it. I really wanted to like it. Like, these are the kinds of stories that I expect myself to like, and then I get disappointed when I end up not liking them. So, not a fun read for me. So the next book that I read, and this one was a recommendation by a coworker. The novel is called Eleanor in Park by Rainbow Rowell. I think many of you know this book. I'm very late to the party. This was one of the books that I've heard most of when I was in either high school. Was it high school or college? Yeah, during my school years. I think it's really good writing. Like Rainbow Rowell, I've read one of her other books. It's Fangirl, I believe, and I really liked that when I was younger. And this one, her writing is consistently great. It's very precise and also emotive while being plot driven. There are just some things that I found problematic while reading it. And to be fair with me, I didn't know anything about the book going into this. I didn't know there was already like an ongoing discourse. So I felt validated. I was like, okay, so people see it too. I just noticed that there were casual racism remarks that weren't really necessary to move the plot forward. I know one of the characters, right, Park, is Korean kid who grew up in the United States, and it sort of shows the racism against Asians back then. I don't know, there was just something about it that wasn't handled properly. It just felt tasteless. It didn't feel like it was showing discrimination, but rather it was normalizing discrimination. You know what I mean? It was weird. Even the way she would talk about Park felt like the way a Korea boof would talk about a Korean man. I also felt that the characters were a little more one-dimensional, more than three-dimensional. I did relate to characters, but I couldn't care for them as much as I wanted to because I felt towards the latter part of the novel they were acting out of character, or there were actions made that were unjustified, or I felt were unjustified rather. I just couldn't connect. I didn't even cry. I asked my coworker for a book that would make me cry, and she said, oh, this book will make you cry. Not a single tear shed. And usually that's because, I don't connect with the characters. I feel like any book that would make me connect with the characters would immediately trigger, waterworks, but this one, not as much, or not at all, actually. I did still enjoy reading the book, but I don't think I would read it again. I still think it's a well-written YA novel about young love and forming a friendship amidst, the hardship that you're both going through. In fact, the hardship is what made the friendship even stronger, and that's what's beautiful about it. It's that they found each other in the dark. That is one of my favorite songs. Good read. So the next book that I read in April is called Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. It's a beautiful name. So it's a dystopia where animal meat is no longer edible. And so what happens if you can't eat animals? Yeah, so human meat becomes a commodity, becomes a norm to eat human meat. And the protagonist is a man who works in one of the human meat factories. At first, he stands on high moral ground. Although he is part of the system, he believes that he is above the system because internally he hates what's happening. But you'll see throughout the novel, this is just a descent into madness, and I love it. It's disturbing, and many times, I mean, cannibalism is disturbing in any situation possible, but it's also a critique on modern society and capitalism. So yeah, it has a lot to say. It's just clothed in all this horrific imagery. Yeah, I really highly recommend this. So the next book is more of a short story, I'd say, but it's also one of the best things that I've ever read in my entire life. I want to thank my friend Sway for recommending this. She actually introduced me to Claire Keegan's works. I read Small Things Like These last year, which I absolutely loved as well. And this one I think I love even more. Yeah, it's shorter, but it made me cry. This is a story about a girl who is temporarily fostered by foster parents because her biological parents can't afford to take care of her at that moment. We see her daily life in the home of these foster parents, and my gosh, there is a line in this book that made me sob in public transport. It's a very unsuspecting line, but oh gosh. I freeze in the chair, waiting for something much worse to happen. But Kinsella does nothing more. So context is that this kid forgot to wash her face and hands before they left for town, and her foster father, Kinsella, told her, "You should wash your face and hands before you leave for town. Didn't your father teach you?" And in this line alone, her foster parents treat her better, and she has a safe space in them compared to her biological parents, where she probably didn't feel as safe. That line in itself just made me so emotional. I was so overwhelmed. I had to just pause and sob a bit for catharsis. So it's a beautiful story, and the ending is wonderful as well. I think everyone should read Claire Keegan's works. She reminds me so much of Alice Munro and the modernists. People compare her to Chekhov, but I feel like she's even better than Chekhov. It's wonderful what a few words can do. I don't know many Irish authors, but Claire Keegan is bound to be a favorite soon. I've only read 2 of her stuff, but I feel like the more I'll read her, the more she'll rank higher on my list of favorite authors. The next book is the very infamous A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. You guys, I have a video of myself reading this book and saying a lot of things about it, so you can watch that. I won't ramble on about this book anymore. I feel like I've graduated from it and would prefer to just move on with my life. So basically, I liked A Little Life. I liked the writing, I liked the characterizations of the characters. I felt like the characters were real human beings. There were things I don't like about the book, which you will see in the video. These are 800 pages, and it didn't feel like it at all. And I remember asking for a book that would make me sob, right? And that was it. That gave me everything and more. I feel like I don't need to cry for the next 5 years because of this book. I'm done. Emotionally depleted. I wouldn't recommend it still. Like, I was talking to a friend earlier and she asked me if she should read A Little Life, and I said, no, you don't need to. You can go on with your life without having read that book. You'll be fine. You'll be really fine without it. I don't know why I did it to myself, but yeah, you don't need to. A Little Life. And then the last book that I read for May, right after A Little Life, is Kang's Greek Lessons. Now guys, I am so disappointed in this because Kang is my girl. She's one of my favorite authors, and I've read every book of hers that was translated to English, and I thought this would be one of her better ones, but this is my least favorite one of hers. But it makes sense to me because this is when she departed from plot and was finding her footing in this genre of fiction. It's very atmospheric and philosophical. Too philosophical for my taste. Like, I don't know, I hate it when people wax poetic about Greek philosophers. Like, I've had enough. The blurb was really interesting. It was about a woman who suddenly lost her ability to hear and speak, and then she meets a Greek professor who was beginning to lose his sight. And these two characters are very sad, melancholy, and they sort of find solace in that together. I had the hardest time reading this. This was only 173 pages and it took me, what, a month? Because, again, I'm very stubborn about my DNFs, right? As you might have also seen in a previous video, I don't like putting books down and giving up on them. Like, I want to finish the books that I read. Unless, you know, it's a life or death situation or I'm filled to the brim with either self-loathing or anger. I do love, like, a no plot, all vibes book. If it gets too pretentious and philosophical, yeah, not for me. And again, I'm sad about it because I've loved each and every book of Han Kang's, and I'm excited for the one that's coming out next year. I feel a drought. I feel a Han Kang drought. Every time she doesn't put out a translated work, I feel a drought. And so I'm disappointed that I wasn't satisfied with this book. So that's my reading recap for April and May. June is starting out well. I finished one book in a day. So let's keep up the pace and hopefully I do better next month. Bye!